There are comedians who make audiences laugh with razor-sharp lines. Others rely on clever banter and quick wit. But Rowan Atkinson achieved something very few entertainers in history have ever managed, making an entire audience burst into laughter with nothing more than a glance, a raised eyebrow, or a pause lasting just a few seconds. Millions of people know him as Mr. Bean, but that is only a small part of the story. Behind the globally famous clumsy character is an artist with extraordinary powers of observation, someone who spent countless hours perfecting the smallest facial expressions in order to create the perfect comedic effect. What is fascinating is that people who have worked with Rowan Atkinson often describe the same experience. They enter the room expecting to meet a comedy legend, only to be surprised by a quiet, intelligent man who is almost unbelievably serious. It is precisely this contrast that created the unique form of humor that sets him apart from everyone else. And to understand why such a reserved man has managed to make the world laugh for decades, we have to begin with the thing Rowan Atkinson does better than almost anyone else, turning the most ordinary moments into something unforgettable. One of the things that distinguishes Rowan Atkinson from most comedians is that he rarely tries to be funny. In fact, the more serious he appears, the more likely he is to make an audience laugh. It is an exceptionally difficult skill because it requires complete control over facial expressions, timing, and reactions. People who have watched Atkinson perform live often speak about his remarkable ability to command an entire room with almost no props or special effects. Using only his face and body language, he can stretch what seems like a perfectly ordinary situation into a comedy routine that leaves hundreds of people laughing non-stop. What makes it even more remarkable is that the laughter in Atkinson's performances often comes from the smallest details. A glance held slightly too long, a puzzled expression that lingers for a few extra seconds, or a reaction completely out of place for the situation can become the centerpiece of an entire performance. He understands that sometimes the funniest thing is not what is said, but what the audience discovers for themselves. His use of language is equally distinctive. Rowan Atkinson has repeatedly demonstrated that even the most ordinary word can become funny when placed in the right context and delivered in the right way. He has the ability to transform seemingly simple things into unexpected moments that catch audiences off guard. One example, often mentioned, is the interviews in which he deliberately asks questions that sound completely serious while containing a level of innocence that is almost absurd. The other person often takes a few seconds to realize that a joke is unfolding, and it is precisely that delay that creates the special comedic effect. In addition, Atkinson is famous for his incredibly subtle powers of observation and imitation. Rather than creating exaggerated impressions, he often copies only a few small details in someone's voice or behavior. It is this precision that makes the performance both convincing and naturally funny. Perhaps that is why many people believe Rowan Atkinson is more than simply a comedian. He is more like a craftsman of laughter, someone capable of finding humor in things most of us would overlook. And all of those skills eventually came together to create a character that completely transformed his career. A clumsy, quiet man recognized around the world from a single expression, Mr. Bean. Today, it is difficult to imagine a world without Mr. Bean. The character has appeared on screens for decades, been broadcast in hundreds of countries, and has virtually overcome every language barrier. Yet the interesting thing is that when Rowan Atkinson first began developing Mr. Bean, he had no idea he was creating one of the most famous comedy characters in television history. The idea of Mr. Bean gradually took shape during the mid-1980s when Atkinson began thinking about a form of comedy that audiences anywhere in the world could understand. He wanted to create a character who did not rely heavily on dialogue, allowing the humor to come from actions, reactions, and everyday situations that everyone could relate to. The result was Mr. Bean. According to Atkinson himself, the character is physically an adult, but views the world through the eyes of a child. Bean is often selfish, impulsive, and sometimes causes all sorts of problems for those around him. Yet it is precisely that innocence that makes it difficult for audiences to dislike him. What is remarkable is that many of Mr. Bean's most famous moments were built from very simple observations of everyday life. A meal at a restaurant, a holiday trip, an examination, or even getting dressed in the morning could become the foundation for an entire episode. Atkinson has a unique ability to spot humor in situations that others consider ordinary. Although Mr. Bean appears completely natural on screen, the process behind the scenes required astonishing precision. Every raised eyebrow, every pause, and every unexpected reaction was carefully calculated. Many scenes lasting only a few seconds had to be filmed repeatedly in order to achieve the exact rhythm Atkinson wanted. Interestingly, in real life, Rowan Atkinson is almost the complete opposite of his famous character. In interviews, he is usually calm, thoughtful, and inclined to analyze things in a highly logical way. As a result, many people meeting him for the first time are surprised to discover that the creator of Mr. Bean is such a quiet and serious individual. As Mr. Bean's success spread across the globe, Atkinson faced a new challenge. The character became so famous that many people began to identify him solely with Bean, forgetting that behind the role was an actor with many different dimensions. It was also at this point that Rowan Atkinson began thinking more deeply about a question that had followed him for years. Was he a comedian, or simply an actor who enjoyed telling stories in a humorous way? Despite being regarded as one of the most successful comedians in the world, Rowan Atkinson has a rather different view of his profession. He has repeatedly said that he has little interest in trying to be the funniest person in the room. Instead, what matters to him is making things interesting. This philosophy is especially evident in television chat shows. While many guests arrive with prepared anecdotes or rehearsed jokes designed to entertain the audience, Atkinson usually appears with a much calmer presence. He prefers natural conversations, where humor emerges unexpectedly rather than being forced. Perhaps that is why so many of his most memorable television moments do not come from pre-planned jokes. They happen when he reacts to an unexpected situation, makes a remark that appears completely serious, or simply views things from a different perspective than everyone else in the room. Interestingly, Atkinson himself has admitted that he is sometimes unsure whether he should be described as a comedian or an actor. That may sound surprising for someone so closely associated with Mr. Bean, but for him, the most important element has always been acting. The laughter is simply the result of creating believable characters and situations. The clearest example of this is perhaps Blackadder, the series that established his reputation in Britain long before Mr. Bean appeared. Unlike the globally famous clumsy character, Blackadder is sharp, sarcastic, and highly cunning. The success of that role demonstrated that Atkinson relied on far more than facial expressions and possessed a much broader acting range than many people realized. Throughout decades of artistic work, Atkinson seems to have followed one simple principle: never try to force the audience to laugh. Create believable characters, develop engaging situations, and allow the humor to emerge naturally. It is this philosophy that has helped his work remain appealing, even as comedy trends have continually changed over time. But if there is one passion capable of rivaling acting in Rowan Atkinson's life, it is something completely unrelated to the stage or the camera. It is his deep love for high-performance cars, an enthusiasm that has stayed with him for most of his life. When he is not in front of a camera or performing on stage, Rowan Atkinson has a passion that surprises many people: cars. For him, automobiles are not merely a means of transport, but a combination of engineering, design, and emotion. Over the years, Atkinson has owned and driven some of the world's most famous sports cars and has frequently attended events for motoring enthusiasts. People who know him often say that when the conversation turns to cars, Atkinson's eyes light up completely. The man who is normally calm and reserved suddenly becomes as enthusiastic as a child discovering a new toy. It is one of the few subjects that can make him talk more than usual. This passion has even influenced his acting career in some amusing ways. On one occasion, he recalled that his wife gave him a humorous piece of advice when he needed to portray the look of someone deeply captivated by another person's beauty. Rather than imagining a romantic scene, she told him to look at the person the same way he would look at a brand new Aston Martin. To Atkinson, it seemed like perfectly sensible advice. However, what is even more remarkable than his love of cars is the enthusiasm he has maintained after decades in the profession. Many performers, after reaching the pinnacle of success, become cautious or fall back on the formulas that brought them fame. Atkinson, by contrast, appears to have retained the same curiosity and excitement about his work that he had at the very beginning. In interviews, he often speaks about acting and comedy with the enthusiasm of someone who is still learning. Despite becoming a global icon, he rarely displays the attitude of a self-satisfied star. Instead, he tends to speak about his work with humility, focusing more on the creative process than on the fame it has brought him. Perhaps that is what has enabled Rowan Atkinson to maintain such lasting appeal. Audiences do not simply admire the characters he has created, they also sense the genuine joy he brings to every performance. Behind the silly expressions and absurd situations stands an artist who takes his craft far more seriously than many people realize. And that is also the key to understanding why his seemingly simple comedy has endured across generations. Because behind that carefully crafted silliness lies a level of precision and dedication rarely seen in the performing arts. From the outside, Rowan Atkinson's comedy can appear very simple. A confused glance, an awkward situation, or a poorly timed reaction is often enough to make audiences laugh. But the more one learns about his career, the more apparent it becomes that behind those seemingly spontaneous moments lies meticulous preparation and extraordinary control. Perhaps that is what sets Atkinson apart from many other comedians. He does not rely on shocking punchlines or fleeting jokes. Instead, he builds humor from deeply human emotions and everyday situations that anyone can recognize from their own life. From Blackadder to Mr. Bean, from the theater stage to the big screen, Rowan Atkinson has demonstrated that comedy does not have to be loud. Sometimes, a perfectly timed pause can be more effective than an entire monologue. It is an art form that very few people have mastered at the level he has achieved. Today, when people think of Rowan Atkinson, many immediately think of Mr. Bean. But perhaps his greatest legacy does not lie in any single character. It lies in his ability to bring joy to millions of people across generations, cultures, and languages through the simplest of expressions. After all, what made Rowan Atkinson a legend is not that he tried to make people laugh. It is that he understood exactly what makes people laugh, and devoted his entire life to perfecting that art. Which Rowan Atkinson moment do you remember most? The classic Mr. Bean episodes, the sharp wit of Blackadder, or one of his hilarious television appearances? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories about the lives and careers of entertainment legends, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss future videos.